The banner was already up when I pulled into the parking lot. Hand-painted letters stretched across the entrance of the Royal Hotel, reading, "Welcome, Patrick Lynn, future leader." Fairy lights framed the edges. A red carpet. A crowd of people who had spent the last 3 months calling me a trash collector's daughter and laughing about it to my face. And Patrick himself, standing at the center of it all in a suit I had never seen before, holding a drink in his hand, laughing the way a man laughs when he believes the story he is told about himself. He didn't see me watching. He never did. That was always his first mistake, and it turned out to be his last. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand what I gave before you can understand what I took away. My name is Melissa. For 3 years, I loved a man named Patrick Lynn with the kind of love that doesn't know when to stop. I worked 3 jobs: a morning shift at the campus canteen, evening shifts at a convenience store 2 blocks from school, and weekend tutoring sessions that left my hands shaking by Sunday night. I did it quietly. I did it because Patrick had a dream of becoming someone important, and I believed in him before he believed in himself. When his scholarship fell short, I covered the gap. When his laptop broke in his second year, I gave him mine and used the school computers. When his mother got sick and the hospital bill came, I handed him $4,200 from a savings account I had been building since I was 16 years old. The money my father had sent me in careful monthly transfers, money I was supposed to use only for myself. Nobody called it debt. They called it love. Remember that. Because everything that came after made a certain kind of terrible sense once I understood what it really meant. Over 3 years, the total amount I spent on Patrick Lynn was $31,750. I know that number because I kept receipts. I kept them in a pale blue folder in the bottom of my desk drawer. Tuition gap, $6,400. Medical emergency for his mother, $4,200. Living expenses, meals, transportation, books, $12,300. The rest, the clothes, the gifts, the dinners on his birthday that he always let me pay for because you're better with money than I am, came to $8,850. $31,750. He never mentioned it. Not once. I didn't either. I thought that was what love looked like. Then one afternoon, during his second year, Patrick came to meet me outside the canteen where I worked the lunch rush. I still had a hairnet on. He had 3 of his classmates with him, people I had never been introduced to, people who looked at my uniform the way people look at furniture that doesn't match the room. I waved. He looked at the ground. That night, he told me his classmates had been asking about his girlfriend. He said, and I want you to hear this precisely, because I have replayed it enough times that I could say it backward. It's embarrassing, Melissa. They all know your family collects trash. They talk about it. It makes me look bad. I didn't say anything. I stood in the kitchen of our shared student apartment, and I turned back to the stove, and I stirred the soup I was making for him. And something very quiet happened inside me. Not anger, not hurt, something colder than both. And that's when I stopped feeling hurt and started feeling clear. He broke up with me 6 weeks later in the parking lot outside my dormitory. He had a girl named Vivian beside him. She was wearing new shoes. Real ones. The kind that cost money neither of them had. Patrick told me I had been using my sacrifices as a moral chain around his neck. That my contributions to his life were manipulation, dressed up as love. He said, I can finally hold my head high and get rid of you. He said Vivian gave him dignity. He said it loudly enough for 4 people nearby to hear it. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, You broke up with me for money. One day you'll regret it. He laughed. I went upstairs. I opened that pale blue folder. I started counting. People think revenge begins with anger. Mine began with a spreadsheet. I spent the next 2 weeks documenting everything. Not out of bitterness. Out of precision. I itemized every transfer, every receipt, every screenshot of a Venmo payment I had sent Patrick over 3 years. I organized them into categories. I printed the document at the campus library in the early morning when no one else was there, 43 pages, tabbed by year, with a cover sheet that simply read, "Financial Summary, Lynn, Patrick." I held the stack in my hands when it came out of the printer, and I thought about how something that had cost me 3 years of invisible labor had taken 11 minutes to print. They thought my silence meant I had nothing. Every single night, I had been counting. Now, I need to tell you something about my father. Something I had known for exactly 48 hours at the time Patrick broke up with me, and something I had not yet told a single soul at school. My father is Lin Wei. He is the wealthiest private citizen in the city. He had hidden this from me for 18 years, raising me in a modest apartment while he managed his empire from offices I had never seen. He drove a simple car to school meetings. He wore plain clothes when he visited. He sold scrap and recyclables from a small warehouse he owned, not because he had to, but because it was where he had started, and he believed a person should stay close to where they came from. He revealed everything to me the morning after Patrick's breakup. He drove to my campus in a car with a license plate ending in $9.99, a number every rich family in the city would recognize on sight, handed me a card loaded with more money than I had ever seen in my life, and said, "Any problem that money can solve is not a problem." I had been funding Patrick Lynn's education with scholarship money and weekend jobs. My father had been waiting until I was old enough to handle the truth. The timing was not ironic. It was perfect. What followed was not planned, at least, not all of it. I did not set out to humiliate Patrick publicly. I simply stopped hiding who I was. And the moment I stopped hiding, everything Patrick had built his new identity on began to collapse. The first crack came on a Monday. That was the day a senior student named Ian Lincoln, the only son of one of the city's 4 founding families, a man whose name alone caused people to straighten their posture, walked up to me on campus, returned a phone I had dropped near the entrance gates, and addressed me by name. Not hey or you. My name. The crowd around us went completely still. Patrick was 20 feet away. I watched his face in my peripheral vision as Ian Lincoln stood beside me, and the entire campus recalibrated in real time. That was their first mistake. They made 3 more. The second mistake happened the night Patrick organized his so-called team-building event at the Royal Hotel, the same hotel his family had no connection to, despite his very confident claim to the contrary. He had invited the whole class. He had promised to pay. He had pawned his family's heirloom, a jade piece his mother had kept through illness and near poverty, to fund the evening. He had done this, I later learned, to stage a public moment where I would be humiliated, exposed, and discarded in front of an audience. He had organized a bottle game specifically designed to force me to kiss another man in front of witnesses, betting that my refusal would make me look prudish and petty, and my compliance would make me look worse. What he hadn't planned for was that I would pour the bottle of wine directly over Vivian's head when she tried to physically force me to comply. What he also hadn't planned for was Ian Lincoln arriving 15 minutes later and removing every person who had participated in constructing that setup. The third mistake was the school forum. After that night, Patrick and Vivian began posting rumors about me online. The central claim was that the man my father was, the older man who had been seen picking me up from campus and visiting me in the hospital, was not my father at all, but a married man I was seeing in exchange for money. They had a photograph. They had a so-called witness. They staged their reveal at the school's annual anniversary ceremony in front of the entire faculty, the student body, and the visiting board members. Vivian stood at the microphone with a photograph held up and called me a mistress in front of 300 people. I let her finish. Then I said, "He is the most handsome man in my heart." Fatherly love is also love. A daughter is a father's sweetheart from the previous life. And then my father walked in. Stay with me, because this is where it gets good. Linway walked into that auditorium in a suit that cost more than most people's cars. He was wearing his board member's credentials. He was the new board member the school had been preparing to welcome all week. He walked straight past the stunned vice principal, straight past Patrick's open mouth, straight past Vivian's photograph still trembling in her hand, and he stopped in front of me and said, "Come to Daddy." The room didn't make a sound. The machine started failing the way expensive things always do, quietly, then all at once. Within 24 hours, Patrick's carefully constructed identity was in free fall. The 43-page packet I had compiled, the one sitting quietly in my bag the entire evening, never even had to land on a table. My father did something more efficient. He simply told the truth. His staff pulled Patrick's actual bank records. The account Patrick had been referencing when he claimed to be the heir to millions of yuan in family wealth contained exactly 736.25 yuan. Less than the cost of the shoes he had been trying to buy for Vivian the week before. Less than the amount he owed me for 1 month's worth of expenses during our second year together. The vice principal read the number out loud. Twice. Patrick's father called him that night. I know this because the audio of that call eventually circulated. Not through me, I want to be clear, but because Patrick, panicked and cornered, had left his phone recording in his coat pocket. His father's voice was calm at first, and then not. He asked Patrick which powerful family he had dared to offend. Patrick couldn't answer. His father told him to go find me and beg for forgiveness. Patrick arrived outside my dormitory at 11 p.m. I watched from the window. He knelt down on the concrete outside the entrance. He said he had been wrong. He said he had been blinded. He said he would spend the rest of his life making it up to me if I would only give him one more chance. I opened the window. I said, "You can stand up. I'm not watching." Then I closed it. Here is something I want you to understand about families that are built on performance. They stay stable by feeding one person to the tension. Patrick's entire identity at that school had been constructed on the premise that I was beneath him, that my background justified his contempt, that my labor was obligation rather than love, that his trajectory upward required my erasure. Remove the lie at the foundation, and the whole structure goes. He didn't just lose me. He lost the version of himself he had invented at my expense. And watching someone lose a lie they've lived inside is not satisfying. It is just quiet. Vivian Quentin was expelled within a week. The school board, my father's board, upheld every sanction without discussion. Patrick was stripped of his Outstanding Student Award and placed on academic probation. Every company under the Lynn Group was formally notified that neither name was to appear on a hire list. I did not ask for this. My father did it because he is my father, and that is what fathers do when they have been kept in offices far from home for 18 years and they finally get to be loud about it. Ian Lincoln and I had dinner the following Friday. Just dinner, no orchestrated moments, no grand gestures, only pork chops instead of beef because he had somehow remembered from a high school I didn't know he had shared that I was allergic. I looked at him across the table and thought about the photograph in my desk drawer, the graduation photo from 3 years ago, the one with the boy in the back row. I had never looked at closely enough. He was right there. He had been there the whole time. My father wants us to get married after graduation. I told him I don't agree with arranged anything. Ian laughed when I told him that. He said, "I know. I've been waiting 3 years to ask you properly. Your father just beat me to it. I haven't answered yet. I'm in no hurry. What I will tell you is this. The moment Patrick Lynn decided that my background made me disposable, he made a calculation. He weighed me against the image he wanted to project, found me lacking, and discarded me in a parking lot with an audience. He thought that was the end of the math. He didn't realize I had been doing my own math the whole time, patient, precise, and completely invisible to him because he had never once looked at me like I was someone worth watching. He spent $31,750 of my money building a version of himself he couldn't sustain. I spent nothing building a version of myself I will carry for the rest of my life. Patrick Lynn's greatest mistake was not the breakup. It was believing that the girl who had quietly funded his dreams would stay quiet once she finally understood her own.